Yes, sir. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I feel like I should be like an FM broadcaster. This is some solid jazz tunes here. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Monday morning. We hope you're having it. Yeah. Oh, yes. Or on the Flintstones. Scoodly, wah, wah, wah.
Wow, wow, wow.
Contact. Remember that? And then they did this. They did this with the square, and this is where all the people under whatever are saying, "Who's the Flintstones?"
All those people our age.
Exactly.
I'll be the businessman who says, "What's your angle? Who's your baby? I'll buy that."
Good for you,
Need a cigar.
Yes. Now we're going. That's so good. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm here with the cool jazz stylings of Mr. Russell Broom, everybody. The incredible paintbrush of Amanda Stobo. And, of course, Mr. Dashboard himself, James Jimmy B. Button.
Yeah. Nobody do this at home. Do not do this at home.
What are you're pulling over to find somewhere safe? Is that what you're doing, Jim?
That's exactly what I'm just pulling into my front of my house right now.
Oh,
you guys started the show too early. I timed it perfectly, I thought. on my dashboard of my car it says 9:59. Now it just turned to 10. See? Damn it.
Yeah.
I mean, darn it.
Well,
already we're
clean,
starting
I
with
gotta say,
jazz.
your dashboard looks clean. That's admirable.
My dashboard looks what?
Clean.
It's
You look
very
like
clean.
you have a very
I'm
well-kept car.
I'm a clean person, Russ. Very clean.
Yeah, I'm the optimist. I'm just trying to find all the good in everything.
Yeah, we need some more of that, don't we?
Yeah.
What you call this in the industry is sparkling repartee. That's what we got going on here, folks. We got some sparkling repartee.
Charm overload.
Yeah, I know. It just tingles right along. How was your weekend, Rusty?
It was nice. I spent Saturday sitting in a chair with a puppy.
Oh,
For the
good.
entire day. It was amazing. Yeah.
Was this part of its training, or?
No, I think the puppy was training me. It was just really nice. I literally watched Netflix, sat in, I have this replica Eames chair that's really comfortable.
Yeah.
And I would get up and make margaritas, courtesy of you. Thank you for that. And then sit back in the chair. And I managed to do that for about 9 hours on Saturday. I'm quite proud of myself because I am the worst at relaxing. Like, I'm terrible at it, and I actually pulled it off. So,
good for you.
Yeah.
What did you see on Netflix?
I watched. Well, it was actually on. I think it was Crave. I watched Band of Brothers. That series. I haven't watched it.
Isn't it good?
It was tremendous. Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to help
you mentioned it. You watched it with John, didn't you?
Yeah. It's a 9-year-old series. They love that stuff.
Yeah.
If there's violence and
the
crime.
puppy was crying the whole time because it was scared, but I'm sure John was fine.
It's quite impressive. And right in the middle of, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, there's a out of the blue, the only time in the entire series, sex scene. So suddenly I was like, whoa, I didn't know that was coming. And then it was good.
Don't you find it a little funny, Dave, that you're all freaked out about the sex scene, but you're not freaked out about the guy getting shot in the head?
You know what?
You're right.
Look at is this a parenting intervention? No, I just wasn't expecting it. It wasn't like I found it offensive. I just didn't know what to do.
Every time we talk about a movie, we have to have this intervention.
Well, it's a good point. What have we become desensitized to? Yeah, it's crazy.
Fair enough. But John has plenty of games on his iPad where people end up shooting at each other. Not as many games on his iPad where people have sex together. So he's definitely
in a few years.
So this is, I think your parenting style so far sounds awesome.
Mandy, can you say something and drag me out of this, please? What can you tell?
I don't think so.
Just tell.
Yeah, you're on your own, Dave.
Oh, thanks for the help on that one, you guys. Hi, Mandy Stobo.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Your morning? How's your morning so far?
It's a good one. I get to see you guys.
That's awesome. Way to plug it, Mandy. Keep plugging it, man.
Hey, and we were talking about the internet is funny, and we thought we would do a very special edition this time because this is when the drive-through grads are starting this week. So, Russ, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a bit about this particular shot here. I'm very curious.
I didn't think you were really going to do this, but yeah. So I graduated in 1989, and I had a problem with graduation because everyone was talking about it being the best day of our lives, and I thought, I'm 18. That can't. Well, I wasn't even 18 at that point, and I was like, this is garbage. Like, there's no way. So to be irreverent, I thought I would get my diploma in barefoot.
Right.
Thinking that would be funny. And the assistant principal of Dr. E.P. Scarlett High School tried to get me expelled for doing that.
What?
Expelled?
Yeah. He thought it was extremely disrespectful. And I was like, well, it was. And that was the point. So, like, thanks for everything. But this is not, if I've peaked here, I'm hooped. I'm done. Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So your rebellion with shoes. I love it.
Yeah, or lack of. And I have, just for the record, guys, I have really ugly feet because
maybe that's true.
I had ingrown toenail issues when I was a kid, so my two big toes look really goofy. So, like, maybe he was just offended by how my toenails look. Yes, thanks for pointing that out, Mandy. Yes,
fungus, man.
No fungus. No, they just grew in funny. I had them removed, and it hurts to have your toenails removed.
Fine.
And look at that. Look at those arches. You could walk over a set of pipes pretty easily, I think. You wouldn't even feel the pipe if you walked across them, would you?
Yeah, I'm comfortable in heels. It's okay. I'm good. They're hard to find in size 12, that's for sure.
And you know
what? Like, my whole graduation was kind of a mess because I had a crush on this girl, and I didn't realize she had a boyfriend. And after our first graduation ceremony, she invited me back to her house because she was having a family celebration.
Right.
And when I got back there, she was like playing tonsil hockey with this guy who was a year older than us, who'd already graduated, that I didn't realize she was dating. And I was like, oh my goodness, my heart just broke. And then when I tried to go home, my parents were so mad that I went barefoot that they wouldn't let me in the house. So, so my actual grad day was... pretty much, I launched into the world with a lot of spite in my heart.
Good one.
I'm pretty impressed by that. The whole thing, everything.
Yeah, it was a heck of a day. But
I like that story.
Yeah.
Did I remember when adults would say high school is the best years of your life. You're going to look back on these, and I thought, if this is the best years of my life and everything's downhill, this is going to be a lousy life. So I never bought into that one. Yeah.
No. Best year of my life was Saturday. I sat in a chair for 8 hours at a party watching TV and drinking margaritas. It was great. I never did that in high school. So.
No.
Oh.
As a guy who's been to a few grads in the last few years, the new Russ Broom is Crocs. That's for the kids that want to go, I'm going to be rebellious. For a while, like I would say about 6 years ago, there was a lot of slippers. A lot of people wore slippers, and that was their, haha. And now there's been like the bright colored, like bright yellow, bright orange Crocs are and the robes are nicer now. I don't know if you've noticed that, but like your robes, Like the new ones now are long and flowing, and you don't necessarily even see what people are wearing. Everything's stepped up a bit since my grad.
Oh yeah, I remember my robe smelled like really badly, and I had nothing to do with that. It was like it came pre-stink. It was like, what did they, like, what happened?
Hey,
you
well,
guys
look
are
at
at rich people schools. I didn't get a robe.
no,
No.
I don't know that I did either, or if they did, it was like small.
Well, like you didn't miss anything.
No.
I still occasionally I'll get a waft of it, and I'm like,
wait. Can I go back to Dave's comment on they were small? Was it like a dickie or something?
oh, it was a full-on robe.
Yeah. Mine was a tank top. It was a very snug tank top.
Oh yeah.
No, it was, but in my head, like the ones now, they look like judges' robes, like the big flowy arms and the big flowy body or whatever. Whereas when I was a kid, we just got a piece of string and wrapped it around our face, and that's
It
what
was
we
good
wore.
enough for us. And we didn't complain.
Oh, we saved all our complaining for now. Hey, look, it is Mindfulness Monday, and you know who we haven't had on our show in a few Mondays?
Who?
You know, I ask it like it's a game show question.
Is this a skill testing question?
Yes, it is. We haven't had Avnish on our show in a while, just to help us with our mindfulness, to help us feel a bit centered and to feel like the world is a good place and it's all good. So I'm hoping he can join us. Oh, looks like he's here. There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, Avnish, how are you, my friend?
Morning. Good. How are you guys?
Uh-oh, he
So
disappeared on my screen.
Monday.
Oh, did he disappear? He doesn't.
No,
there he is.
Front and center.
For a second.
Oh, he probably just went to another part of your phone, Jim.
Okay.
Look at the back of your phone.
Yeah.
Turn around the back of your phone.
The call is coming from inside the car.
Right.
You're in the back seat. I see.
Hey, Avnish.
Yes.
We have you on our show to help us be centered and be mindful and be wise. And but before we get into that,
Yes.
we've been talking about racism and all of us learning a lot about it. And you have stories from your perspective around this that I thought even that go back to when you were a kid in other countries. Tell us a bit about your stories and take us through that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is a really difficult topic, right? I think that the fact that we are addressing it and we're trying to explore it and trying to understand it is the beginnings of what this is all about. And I'm very, very fortunate that my sort of existence in Canada has not been shaped by sort of any major racist act. Mm-hmm. You know, there's I would say little stupid comments like, hey, Packy, or whatever. But at the end of the day, those things didn't sort of impact me because I felt safe and secure. And I think my parents created an environment in where we were had multicultural families, and we had all of our neighbors were sort of different. You know, growing up, my best friends were from Iraq, and across the street were an Israeli family, and down the road was another Lebanese family. And, you know, this is the Southwest, right? That's sort of kind of all of a sudden you start taking into perspective and being like, oh, and that's sort of how we grew up. It was just the way that it was. And you're talking about graduating, right? The graduation, I went to elementary school in 85. My parents stood in line to make sure that we got into French. And I think that all of a sudden things like race disappeared because we were all trying to figure out this new language, right? We were all like, all the kids were trying to figure out something else that was completely different than any of us. Right. And all of a sudden you have unity around, you know, exploring this difference. And so we had a very unique opportunity to live in a space where it wasn't sort of directly impacted, or we weren't directly impacted by it. But interesting enough, it was my own community that I felt most disconnected to. I was called whitewashed. I was, you know, a coconut. I was sort of, I didn't hang out with those guys. When they were playing ball hockey, I was playing ice hockey. When they were playing basketball, I was playing baseball, you know, and it was just sort of a different existence that when we came together, I didn't just hang out with a brown group of friends. And it was really fascinating. And even I feel the divides now in terms of when I see a lot of those folks that we grew up with, and I'm like, I just don't fit in here. Because they chose for me not to fit in there. And that's a really kind of interesting reverse space to be in. But that's sort of where we're at, right? We're very fortunate to. I'm very fortunate to sort of have that experience. But as I was thinking about this, I really started to think about the racism that's sort of built into, and we're talking about like systematic racism and some of these things that are around that we don't fully understand but have huge impact on us. And I'm not going to talk about sort of locally. I'm going to talk about Indian sort of, well, and this is, sort of broad reaching statements, but as an Indian and as an Indian of Indian parents and grandparents, we believe in, the caste system. We believe in a system in which you create hierarchy among humans, that some are better and some are not. And you even create sort of names and recognition of what those people are to ensure that hierarchy is met. And so now you've got a belief system that is, I think, complemented at times with religion, so that people are actually believing that this is correct, that I am born into a caste which allows me these sort of opportunities, these types of things, whether it's responsibilities, whether it's stature, whether it's acceptance, all of those pieces, while I'm able to then potentially marginalize those who are not within the same caste as me, because that's sort of how it's built. And not sort of how it's built, that is how it's built.
And was that like that growing up for you?
It wasn't here, right? It was when I saw it the most when we traveled. And so my dad's from Singapore, my mom's from Kenya, and so when we went back to Singapore, more than Kenya. Kenya was a bit different, but more in Singapore, I had a grandmother that was very much entrenched in sort of that belief system. And I can appreciate it. I understand why she would be. This is sort of her upbringing, her education, what she's been taught. But how it played out was really interesting. And as we returned back and forth, and I was, lucky enough to go back to Singapore probably every sort of 4 or 5 years. So as you grow up, all of a sudden, the frameworks that you operate within are being sort of challenged, and you are able to find your own voice within some of those frameworks. And that was the part I think that is most interesting. And so I'll just share a little story so what I was, we were really young, our first trip to Singapore, I think I was 2. And in Singapore, the culture there is, there's a lot of nannies. So it's a nanny culture, and they're often from other parts of the world. And our nanny, Saroja, was with our family. She was young. I think she was just 18 or 19 years old and had come over. She's from South India. And she was there to sort of support our family. So Saroja changed my diapers and was, sort of took care of me if my parents were out, or she was part of the family unit. And had been with my family and stayed with my family, with the exception of sort of an 8-year gap, up until I was sort of 22 and 23 when I returned back to Singapore, and she was still our nanny, right? At that time, what was interesting is that she wasn't changing my diapers, she was changing my grandfather's diapers. So my grandfather was sick, he was about to die, and she was taking on that caregiver role, right? The caregiver role that none of the other grandchildren would have taken on, that nobody else could have, I think, taken on. And in order to prevent him from being in a hospital or any of those other things, she took care of him as if he was her father. And it's been amazing to sort of come in and out of Saroja's life and have her in mind, where, at 15 years old, I'm starting to understand the divisions of how my grandmother is treating the help, right? And how things start to shift, and how my responsibilities and sort of explicit asks from my grandmother to do certain things or not do certain things, to change my clothes if I had given Saroja a hug, to wash my hands after certain, certain things had happened. Like all of these things now that are layered on in this really intense belief system. Where at 22, when I'm seeing her care for my grandfather, who I deeply loved, I'm like, fuck it. These types of your belief system is now not my belief system. And so how do you become sort of a micro protester when you've got these deep values of respecting your elders and understanding where my grandmother came from and why her belief system is the way it is, but also knowing that I now have a voice in which this is not aligned with my belief system. This does not reflect who I am. This is not the things that I want to. How do I now demonstrate where I fit into this more than anything else? And I was mad. I was angry at my grandmother. So a level of disbelief of how do you treat others like this? But there was no changing that. There was no way that I could have had a rational conversation. One, my Gujarati is not good enough to have a sort of great conversation with my grandmother around the nuances of, authority dynamics and why, humans are should be better than we are. But it starts to allow for you to say, okay, well, how am I going to stand up for myself? What are the things that I'm going to do in order to prove that I don't believe this is right? So I started to rebel. I started to rebel a little bit. And the things that I started to do was started to sort of clean up my own room. I would clean my bathroom. I would clean Saroja's bathroom after she was done using it. I would help her in the kitchen. I would lay out table, like when we're sort of serving my grandmother for lunch or for dinner. I would make sure that everything was out and always set up an extra place for Saroja, even though she never ate with us. Like little things where my grandmother's like, why would you set that there? I'm like, oh, in case Saroja wants to eat. And she's just like, it's such a concept of like, how dare you? And she would quietly take the plate away and put it onto to the lazy Susan and just sort of pretend that these things never happened. She loves Saroja. There wasn't that was actually true. She appreciated who she was, but the belief system around the fact that Saroja came from an untouchable class or a lower class shaped the behaviors that she showed to her because it was sort of what was expected. And so, you start to think about what else can you do? And I think a lot of people are thinking about that right now. What else can I do in order to support those other people who are in pain, the other people who are suffering, other people that are going through this? And I think these types of sort of shows of solidarity are really, really important. Right? It allows for us in our authentic way to be able to demonstrate why we think that or what we believe the injustice is, and then how we can stand up, for it. And it was very different, of course, in a family setting where, my grandmother, she was very strong in how she was, but also would never necessarily address these things head on, right? So it was always sort of in a passive way. So my resistance became passive. I quietly learned how to drive a left-hand car and started taking Saroja into town. I started bringing meat into the house when my grandmother wasn't there, so that we could have chicken curry and fish curries, and we would do this in totally covert things. It's just like these little micro ways of tearing down the authority systems because they actually didn't serve us. When you've got this amazing woman who cared for us as humans, and that was. It's fascinating sort of being within a system that is set up to create division and the effort that is required to find unity. And that's the part, is that it's so much easier to exclude. It's so much easier because I think that we can justify exclusion. It makes us feel special to a certain point, right? When we exclude, because it's us. It's our little thing. The effort that's required to include is so much more conscious. It requires effort, and it's sort of this sort of better and better principle. It needs to be revised at all times.
That is the key, I think. Is better and better means in between the first better and the second better, things can go off and things can go sideways, and you say, okay, back to better, and then things can go off and go sideways, and then back to better, and that's part of that game. Can you so what are we going to do to be mindful today? What is give us a 30 seconds on, all right, for today, here's something we can do.
Totally. One, if if you're trying to support and you can't support, in your mindfulness practice, surround those who are sort of on the front lines with positive energy, right? Wrap these massive protester groups, the police, whoever sort of you are believe requires it, with energetic light, right? I think this is a really important place. If I can't be there in a human form, then allow for me to be there in an energetic form and sort of wrap these folks. The other part is the two affirmations that I've sort of put together that I think are really important. One is for us in terms of a personal piece, and then one is in relationship to others. So the one is, I forgive myself and I accept the path of growth that I'm on. And that is, I think that's a really tough one, because self-forgiveness, and I was talking to MBF about this, but as a part of his mindfulness practice, he forgives himself. And it's incredibly powerful, right? To sort of look at yourself and say, I forgive you. I forgive you for the mistakes that you've made. I forgive you for maybe whether it's thoughts or actions or whatever else. You forgive yourself. And I think my grandmother would be a perfect person to be able to forgive herself for this. It wasn't necessarily her fault. But that self-forgiveness, I think is really important if you understand the pain that may be sort of imposed and inflicted on others.
Yeah.
And the second one is, I release those who have brought me hurt or pain.
Wow. And
this is the opportunity to not hold the burden of this. They talk about the idea of pain is not an option, but suffering is. And what is the sort of the suffering part of this? And who are you holding on with you that has brought you this pain? And why are we holding on to it? And sometimes it's sort of this self-fulfilling piece. We want to feel that pain sometimes. Right? We want to feel that pain that's inflicted by others because it allows for us to sort of justify some of our own existence.
Oh, those are great.
But this is about releasing that. And how do you release that? And so if in your mindfulness practice, surrounding those people, I do it. I put them into a hot air balloon and I let them just sort of float away. Yeah. Within this idea of being hyperbolic. It's a bright red and pink balloon to signify love, and I just let them float, and maybe they burn up in the atmosphere, like who knows? But I just let them let them just cruise off, and sometimes I've released the same people over and over and over again because they're they tend to come back.
Right.
That is excellent, Avnish. Thank you so much. Those are great affirmations and so appropriate for all of us in our world as we try to find our way through. There's going to be so many things that happen in our lives, and I think of this, but this is one where you go, okay, let's just stop for a second and go, it's going to be okay. Yeah. That's so good. Wow, Avnish is like perfect. So my final, I wanted to tell a quick story before we all left and remind everybody.
Can I chime in here for one more thing, Dave?
Go nuts.
Oh, sorry. So I saw Saving Private Ryan over the weekend.
Did you want to bring
remember this conversation?
John has seen it, so it's good.
Well, that's what we're talking about. You were asking me what's the appropriate age for somebody, and I was like 9+. I feel like it's like between 12 and 17. Because after that, you understand sort of the gravity of the situation. And I was sweating. My heart was just like, it was not good. As an adult, this was not a good movie for me to watch. So I think it's sort of got to be almost 2D. At what point do you live and you're almost two-dimensional that you don't fully understand it?
How did Soren enjoy it?
Yeah, Soren loved it, and
look, you guys, I won't take this sort of wait, no, you know what? I'm releasing. No, what am I doing? I'm releasing those who have brought me hurt or pain. Yeah. It's no problem. Yeah. See, it's right there.
Send them away.
Yeah. All of that judgment I'm feeling right now, I'm just releasing it. So it's no problem for me. It's quite easy.
So right now
So if I say I just bought John a machine gun to go out in the backyard and play with, is that bad? Here's something I was thinking about on this weekend, and it was a lot of thinking about this team because I think of this, but I was thinking about our original Dave Kelly live shows that we did, and hopefully we'll do soon. Was this? It was all like this gradual, crazy. I don't know, will this work? And then we tried again. Well, I don't know, will this work? And then we tried again. Sort of like better and better, Avnish, what you're talking about, and how you do a bit and then things go sideways and you get better and other things go sideways. And I remember the first time we were at the Grand Theater downtown, and I had invited Jan to be part of the show, and Russ was at the show with Michael. And I was so nervous because this was the first show that was a big show. Like, it was a legit theater where people were there and they paid money, and it was this. And I remember standing backstage and going, this is, I don't, Russ Broom is here. Michael Bernard Fitzgerald is here. Jan Arden's here. And you guys were there, and I was just sweating. So music started, and I walked out, and I remember even, Mandy, you had a pile of art you had to do off the top of the show. And then, and I remember watching Mandy was right in, and Jim was Jim and laughing and in it, and Russ and the flat, or there weren't the flat whites yet, right? It was just you with Michael.
Yeah, I think I was just playing with Michael on that one.
Yeah, it was small. And then, and I thought, okay, how do I get in? How do I get rid of all this frantic energy, and how do I get into the show? And I remember Michael was playing, and I looked over, and Mandy was just laughing and listening to Michael. And I remember thinking, instead of being nervous, why don't you just watch Michael? So I looked at Mandy and went, oh yeah, and I watched Michael. And then at another point, Jan was talking, or something else was going on, and I got in my head, and I was nervous, and I looked at all these people, and I look over, and Mandy is just laughing and in. And everything, anytime in that show, and ever since then, whenever I wasn't sure about I'm nervous and I'm afraid and I think things are going to go sideways, I would look at Mandy, because Mandy was always in and alive. And it always reminded me of what it means. Mandy is one of those people in the show. She's just present. So I thought of you, Avnish, and I thought of your work with us and with everyone to say, just be in the moment, just be present. And that is the gift of Mandy Stobo and the gift of this show. But even more on that live setting, there's nobody like her that helped me be in. So I just wanted to say that story is a reminder for all of us, how we all play a part. And for me anyway, that is the biggest part of all. So thank you, Mandy, for being so great.
Thanks, Dave. That sure feels so nice. Thank you.
Well, it's true. And on a story like that, I think, Jimmy's gone. Did you know sometimes if I talk too much about Mandy, Jim's like, well, screw that, and hangs up the phone. So,
apparently.
Right?
Probably illegally parked.
Jimmy was going from house to home. And I'll call him back, but I don't know if he's back for the dance or not. I'm going to call him. And Avnish, sorry, buddy, you are in charge of doing Jim's dance. So whatever that is, you're in charge of it. Here's what's fun. Tomorrow, I'm going to ask my dad if kids these days are any worse or better than they were when he was a kid. And then on Wednesday, Bret the Hitman Hart's going to be on the show. So we are going to do some solid work with Bret Hart. And that's just the next couple of days. It's going to be great. Amazing. But for now, Jimmy Button, look at, he's not connected. We're going to dance. Is everybody ready? Are you ready to dance?
Ready.
Okay.
I love you guys.
You're so great.
Avnish, that was impressive.
That was
nice moves going on there.
I felt the gym.